Now that it's March, it's officially 2 years since I pierced my own septum, and I have finally come to the conclusion that I want to start stretching it. I mainly thought about this because I'm getting a little bit tired of just wearing this simple ring. When I first got my septum pierced, I did try out a lot of different jewelry for it, but I never really got into septum clickers and all that stuff, so I always just went back to this ring. And so this is what I've basically been wearing for the past 2 years, and I'm starting to get a little bit tired of it, so I thought I'd just explore some new options. And I think I mentioned this in my earlier videos around when I started to pierce my septum, that my favorite type of septum jewelry were the really thick pinchers. But to wear those, of course, you have to have a stretched septum, and I wasn't really sure if that was something I wanted to go for in the beginning. But now that I've had it for 2 years and feel more comfortable with it, I decided that I just finally want to try it. I did of course have a couple of days where I thought about it and if I really wanted to do it or not, and try to come up with reasons why I didn't want to stretch it. And the only reasons I could come up with was that if I stretched it and I was wearing only glass pinchers, one day I'd probably get tired of those too. And maybe I would like to wear something smaller again, like this ring, like something with a small gauge. You could probably still wear a small gauge ring in a stretched septum, but I feel like maybe it would wiggle around too much, depending on how far you stretch. But then I had the amazing idea of just wearing a tunnel, then putting in a small gauge ring, and then a second smaller tunnel to kind of fit the ring between two tunnels. I'm not sure if that would actually work out, but it's an idea that I have. And also for those days when you might have to hide your septum piercing for work or whatever reason, you could always just put in a single flare tunnel or a no flare plug, and then it doesn't look like you have your nose pierced at all. So I feel like with stretching my septum, I will have all the possibilities in the world compared to just wearing small gauge jewelry. So that means that I can wear big gauge glass pinchers. I'm also a little bit of a weirdo and I actually really like the look of septum spikes or septum tusks. So I'd be able to wear those if I wanted to. And I can still also wear small gauge rings or nothing at all with just wearing a tunnel or a plug. So I feel like stretching my septum gives me a lot more options regarding jewelry than just having a small gauge. But just like my ears, I don't plan on stretching really big. And it's also kind of hard to envision the pincher jewelry when I don't have anything to compare with. And also the thing with pinchers is that they are tapered at the end. So for the end pieces to look kind of thick, like I want them to, I'd have to go even larger for the actual gauge inside the piercing hole. So that is kind of one thing I don't like with the pinchers. They look a lot smaller than they actually are, if that makes sense. And I can even show you an example right here with the smaller sizes that I have. So the ring that I have is 1.2 millimeters thick, while the pincher is 1.6 millimeters, which means it's thicker than the ring at the top. But if you look at the part that's actually visible, the pincher actually looks a size smaller than the ring. So because of that, it is kind of hard to know what size I will end up stretching to. I'll just have to figure it out while I stretch up until I find the piece of jewelry that I like. I don't think I'll go as big as my ears. My ears are a 0 gauge or 8 millimeters. I've kind of set a first goal, which is 6 gauge or 4 millimeters, but then I might go to a 4 gauge or even a 2 gauge. 2 gauge I think is my last goal. So like anywhere between 6 and 2 gauge I think I'll end up with. As of today, I have actually stretched 2 sizes already, but I did put in my old jewelry just for the purpose of this video, because I thought we'd do the process all over again today, just so you can see my very first stretch. Like I mentioned earlier, this ring that I'm wearing right now is only a 16 gauge or a 1.2 millimeter. However, when I pierced my septum, I used a 1.5 millimeter needle. I don't know if that would qualify as a 15 gauge, if that even exists. but that means that my hole basically was pierced closer to a 14 gauge. I already had a pincher in that size from my very first video where I changed my septum jewelry. So I'm glad I kept that one because that's the first one that I put in, and I'll change to that right now. So I'm just gonna change the camera angle so you can see it better. I'm just gonna look in my mirror here and find the hinge. Like so. And I did have a pincher in the same size as my ring, a 16 gauge. So I'll just compare that to the new 14 gauge so you can see the difference. And that one basically just slid right in because my nose was pierced technically almost at that size. So as you can maybe tell from looking at it right now, it looks a lot thinner than the ring I was just wearing. But yeah, that's the thing with pinchers. And I've already written down my progress, so February the 25th was when I decided that I wanted to start stretching my septum, and that's when I put in this old jewelry. Since this basically wasn't a stretch, I decided that only after a couple of days I wanted to try the next size up, which would be a 12 gauge, because that is also just 0.4 millimeter size up. But the thing is, I didn't really have jewelry in that size yet. I had ordered new pinchers from Crazy Factory, but of course it takes a week or two for them to arrive. But what I did have was my ear tunnels. So after a couple of days I just tried to put in the 2 millimeter tunnel, and it would kind of go halfway in on one side, but it wasn't loose enough to get it all the way through. So I just waited a couple more days, and then on March the 2nd I was able to fit this through. And I'll just do that now. There it is. So all within a week I've already gone up 2 sizes, technically. Stretching further, I don't really plan on using anything other than the pinchers. Because of how they are shaped, they basically work just like a taper would. So I'm hoping that will work on its own. And if not, then maybe I'll try the taping method that I used for my lobes. And I definitely don't expect the upcoming sizes to stretch as fast as the 2 previous did, because of the special circumstances. And I probably won't make separate videos for each stretch, but rather make a compilation, just like I did with my ears. But I might post some updates on my Instagram if you want to follow me there for more recent updates. Now I'm just waiting for my new pinchers to arrive in the mail, so I can finally start wearing something that actually shows. The pinchers have a little bit more weight to them as well, as opposed to the tunnel, so that might help with the stretching too. This time I only bought pinchers up to an 8 gauge or 3 millimeters. The first one I got I ordered from Body Art Forms because I didn't think that Crazy Factory had pinchers. But I found out that Crazy Factory didn't call them pinchers, they are calling them claws. And I just found that out, so this time I ordered from Crazy Factory in the smaller sizes, but in the larger sizes they also increased the diameter of them a lot, and that was after the 4 millimeter. So when I reach that size I will go back to Body Art Forms again, even though they are a little bit more expensive, just so I can get a smaller diameter. So I think that's it for this video. I will have a easy DIY septum chain coming up, so be sure to subscribe if you aren't already so you don't miss out on my videos. As always, a huge thank you to my 2 patrons, Fanny and Elliot, for making these videos happen. And then I hope to see you in my next one. Vi ses!